Welcome to The Legal Edge, where we dive into what actually drives law firm growth. I'm your host, Rob Rosasco, and today we're talking about something every solo practitioner knows all too well: the constant juggling between being an attorney, being a marketer, being a business owner, and everything that falls in between. Today, our guest is Artie Vaughn, founder and attorney at Vaughn Defense. After spending 12 years as a JAG officer in the U.S. Air Force, where he tried cases, taught trial advocacy in the Judge Advocate General School, and became one of the Air Force's premier trial advocates, to launch his own solo practice in 2023. He focused on criminal defense, student conduct cases, Title IX matters, and proudly represents members of our military. But here's what makes this conversation truly valuable. Artie just isn't practicing law. He's simultaneously managing a business, marketing a law firm, while still serving as regional defense counsel for the Air National Guard. He's living the reality that most solo attorneys face each and every day, doing everything on your own while still trying to grow your business. Artie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. I very much appreciate it.
All right, before we dive into the nitty-gritty and the details of managing a solo practice, I always love hearing an origin story. Artie, you didn't just transition from the military and join an existing firm. You hung out your own shingle and you built Vaughn Defense from the ground up. So let's rewind for a moment. What led you to go solo, start your own practice, rather than join an established firm? Walk us through that decision-making process.
Yeah, it's a good question. That's we could spend an entire episode on, quite frankly. But to make it as short as possible, it is in 2019, when it came time to change assignments when I'm still active duty, my wife and I we were done with the moving around. It was time to find something else. And so we liked where we were. We wanted to stay. And so I actually started working for about 2.5 years for Auburn University. I was in their Title IX office as a Title IX specialist, investigating and adjudicating cases of sexual harassment, sexual assault, misconduct types of things of a more serious nature. And then I left there after COVID and did work for a firm where we did some family law, some criminal defense, a little bit of estate planning, kind of one of those one-stop shops that does all sorts of things. I loved where I worked. I just didn't necessarily everything that I did. I mean, look, family law is just not for me. It's very difficult subject matter, and I can represent some of what society would call the worst of the worst people, but they don't hold a candle to some of the clients you would get in family law matters. So I had to leave that. So I have a great relationship with that firm, but they understood that I've stretched this as far as I can go. So I left that, learned a lot during that time, but I left that, worked exclusively with someone doing only military defense stuff. And then it came time for me to figure out, all right, what's next? Because I wasn't totally fulfilled in doing what I was doing. And I just decided, look, I've learned a lot from these different places. And before I joined the Air Force, I'd worked for a year doing some insurance defense. And so I had a good variety of people and office experiences that I could learn from. And I just felt like, look, everybody does things their own way. And when you work for someone, you need to do it their way. And I just got tired of that. And I said, look, I've learned a lot about how to do this. There are ways that I want to practice law. And the only way I know I can affirmatively do that is if I do it myself. And so I had some conversations with my wife, and November of 2023, I just threw it up and said, let's go. And so here we are. So I did do some firm stuff, but the short is that I wanted to practice law my own way.
Understood. And I think that's, at the end of the day, that's why a lot of people either open their own law practice or start their own business in general. You've got an idea as to how you want to do things, and the most effective way to do that is do them on your own.
Correct.
All right. And I should have opened with this, and dummy me, if you look at the background, obviously you and I have discussed this constantly, but I should have opened with a War Eagle.
Yeah, War Eagle.
All right.
Tough year, but you're always the same.
Auburn fans, we always hope for the best. So we hope things will get better.
That's right.
So as you just mentioned, you opened your firm, Vaughn Defense, in November of 2023. So you're about 2 years into the practice. What advantages do you think the 12 plus years as a JAG gave you when you started your own practice?
Probably a couple of things. One, military courts martial are rather formal processes. It's a formal tribunal. You stand when you address people. You don't object without standing. Like, it's very, very formal. And along with that, you learn like regimented ways of doing things. Like, you understand the rules, you apply those rules, you follow those rules without fail. Like, that's just what you do. State court practice is not necessarily like that. Not for better or worse. It's just not like that. It's more informal. While there's still formal things that take place, obviously, it's a little more informal. Bringing in some of the regimented ways that I do things immediately seemed to make an impact on the judges. And it created an air of competence, even if I didn't think it was actually there yet, because I was still learning state court processes. And so that in and of itself allowed the competence to follow, which I would tell you, I'm still chasing that. But that confidence that the military kind of instilled into you created a sense of competence in front of others that then allowed me to catch up. So I think that was one thing. The second thing is just simply being part of a bureaucratic organization. The federal government as a whole, interesting times now, but I think everybody pretty much understands like it's a very bureaucratic organization, and the military is the same way. The military industrial complex, a term coined years ago. With that comes a healthy amount of what some refer to as like the GSD leadership style, get stuff done. And so you just figure out like, hey, I need to get this done and I'm not really sure how to do it. And I got all these roadblocks in the way, and you just work and navigate your way through that to just get it done. Because at the end of the day, I just need to accomplish the mission. And so those two things there, I think really helped. The fact that it appeared that I had a lot of competence, and the fact that I just knew how to get things done, right? Some would say, don't take no for an answer, whatever it is. I think those two things were probably single-handedly the two things that helped me do this and get started and be successful in a short period of time.
Okay. And I would think as a criminal attorney, your clients want an attorney that get things done. All right. So let's again go back to the beginning. So be completely honest. What were the first 90 days after you opened your doors, virtually speaking? What were they like? And what surprised you the most when you started your own practice?
Well, it was pretty stressful because I made this decision in November, which is not the best time to open any business unless you're in sales for Christmas time. But people aren't seeing attorneys generally during the holidays, and the court systems slow down. And so the timing probably wasn't the best for me. But because of the way that I've operated my business and started this, which we'll probably get into later, my overhead is incredibly low. It was lower then than it is now, and it's still very low in comparison to what others have. And so I didn't need a whole lot. I didn't need but one or two clients, quite frankly, a month to be breaking even and getting by. And I got that. In December, I had a client or two, and in January, I had a client or two. And so after the first month, I was profitable, and I've been profitable every month since then. But those first 90 days were pretty stressful just because it's the unknown, right? You just don't know where the money's coming from. A friend of mine once told me that carbs and paychecks are man's worst enemies because it creates complacency, right? You always know where your paycheck's coming from. When you don't have that, it creates almost like this hunter mentality of, I got to go get it. And so it worked out.
If I don't, it's not coming.
That's right.
Yeah. So looking at your practice areas, you chose to focus on criminal defense, student conduct, and Title IX matters specifically. Why those three practice areas, and how do they work together to form your business model?
I chose to do those three things. One, because it's three things that I've done before. I wasn't interested in trying to learn a brand new area of the law. Like I wasn't trying to let's throw up a shingle and do bankruptcy law. I don't know anything about that. And I didn't want to potentially retain clients that then I'm having to learn what they need when that's not beneficial to them.
And you certainly weren't interested in bringing family law back into the mix either, were you?
Absolutely not. No, I don't do that. And so I looked and just said, what are the things that I've done before, putting aside that if I'm good at it or not, I don't know, I've got experience in it, I'll put it that way, and that I enjoyed. And it was criminal law, because military law it's criminal law at the heart of it. If you're talking about military justice, you can prosecute or defend a military court-martial, you can prosecute and defend a trial in any jurisdiction. It doesn't really matter. So I knew how to do that. I knew how to do trial work. I knew how to deal with student conduct and Title IX matters from working at the university for 2.5 years in higher education. I knew how that process worked, which is largely administrative in nature. So it's an administrative law type of thing. And then military defense, it's not something that I put in the forefront of what I do, because it's not. I have a very small amount of military clients, but if they are looking for help and they want to find me, then I will certainly help them. And so I chose those areas because those are the ones that I'd done before and I enjoyed. And if I'd done other areas of law that I didn't like before, then I just said, I'm not going to do it. And my website even says that. Hey, if you're looking for, these other types of law, I'm not your guy. I'm happy to take your call and try to get you to somebody, but that ain't me. And then the way they work together, one, they're all generally a defense criminal focus, even student conduct. It's not technically criminal law, but there can be a defense element to it. Right. And specifically, criminal defense and student conduct, the age of information sharing, any student by and large that gets in trouble in the local jurisdiction for minor possession or DUI or heaven forbid some other felony level offense gets reported to the university. And 95 times out of 100, that student's then going to be called into student conduct or receive something from the Title IX office. And it's based on the same set of facts, but it's an entirely different process. And because I know how to do both of those, the criminal process as well as the administrative process, and understand the intricacies and how they're related and how the decisions you make in one can drastically impact what takes place in the other, because probably no shocker here, the criminal process takes a very long time. The administrative process does not. And so when you're going through that administrative process, you need to understand that things you do there can potentially be used in the criminal process. And so understanding the interplay of how those two work allows me, I think, a unique niche, if you will, that you don't have to go get two separate attorneys, one to help you with student conduct and one to help you with a criminal thing. I can do them both. And it works better that way because, once again, I understand how the decisions you make in one can impact the other. And so that's why I ended up in those areas of practice, and that's why I've just stayed there.
How about from a competitive standpoint? I would think as an outsider looking in, that's quite a competitive advantage, understanding both aspects of that process. Do you have many competitors that do criminal law as well as the administrative aspect with the university?
Very few. There's maybe one or two that would do that. I do get criminal lawyers that retain clients, but then will refer the student conduct piece out to me.
Right.
And say, hey, just get with him. He'll help you with that. And then I'll work with their criminal lawyer to make sure, hey, here are the things I'm doing, right? Here's what's going to happen. How's this going to impact what you've got going on? And so it does create this need to work together, which is good for the client. But the short answer is there's very few that will handle both the criminal and student conduct / Title IX piece at the same time.
All right. So now let's dig into the good stuff. Every solo attorney faces essentially the same challenge: being a CEO, a CFO, a marketing director, the HR department, and then, of course, practicing law. So you wear every hat. And where most attorneys went to law school to practice law and learn how to practice law, they don't really necessarily learn how to run a business. So how are you managing all of this without suffering from burnout, even 2 years in?
Yeah, I would tell you, I'm still learning. Every month and every day is a different day. Because of the way I operate, I don't have a ton of administrative tasks that I need to do. You know, I run a virtual business. I don't have a brick and mortar. You're not going to drive around town and see my building and pull in and come into the front desk and see the secretary and all the things that go on at a law firm. I don't do that. I run this out of my home. This is my home office here. And so that makes me much more nimble. It gives me a lot more flexibility. And so when I'm not dealing with all of the things that come from being like a landlord in a brick and mortar with office equipment and staff and all of that, all of those administrative tasks that I imagine are pretty burdensome are gone from me. I don't have that. So administratively, all I really do is I do have some firm software that I put client info in, and, you know, the software helps generate commonly used documents like discovery requests and notices and things like that. And so when I retain a new client, I will put that stuff in the software system, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. It doesn't take very long to do that. But then that saves me an immense amount of time in the future, because now when I need to go generate some letters or discovery requests or some sort of motion, I can hit 2 or 3 buttons and all of a sudden it will create that for me, and then I can go in and change it. And so that saves me a lot of time. And then as far as the other thing, like bookkeeping types of things, up until this last month, I would just wait until the 30th, 31st of the month, or even the 1st, and I would sit down and I have an Excel spreadsheet, very basic, and I just export my bank account into that spreadsheet, and I go make notes and say, all right, here's what I made this month, and here are my expenses. And that was it. Writing checks out of it to pay staff. I don't do any of that. And so the admin piece of it is pretty minimal compared to most. As far as marketing, I use your business here to help. And I did this, I guess we're coming up on maybe a year now, where I decided, because initially I built my own website. I did all the things myself. And then I decided, hey, I'm getting some retained clients, but I want to ramp that up a bit more. I want to be a little more selective in what I'm getting. And I paid for the website design and the search engine optimization and the blog posts and content and things that come with that. And so when I outsource that piece of it as well, then all of a sudden I'm not worried about the marketing aspect of it. I rely pretty much solely on search engine optimization and word of mouth. I don't have billboards. I don't do radio ads. I do have a bunch of koozies, right? It's a college town. And so those seem to be rather popular.
Yeah.
But that's about it. Those are the things I do. And so a typical week, I would say most of the time I'm focused on the client work because the business development, the marketing's handled, the administrative tasks are very minimal. So I don't have a whole lot I've got to deal with on that side, which allows me to do what I want to do, which is practice law.
And do the very things that your clients appreciate the most. And that's focus on their case, not necessarily running your business.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So based on your experience, where do you think, and I'm going to ask you to step outside of your practice now, but just based on the experiences that you've had in starting your firm and now managing it for 2 years, where do you think most solo attorneys lose money or waste time that they don't even realize it's happening?
I think just for me, whether you want to call it wasting money, I don't know, but the brick and mortar business with having a secretary and or a paralegal and office furniture and office equipment and all of the things that come with that are going to be pricey. You start paying rent in some sort of strip mall or a building or whatever that you're going to have. I would assume you're probably on the low end, maybe $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 a month that you need to sustain all of that. So you've got to retain that type of work every month just to break even before you can start paying yourself. I don't have all that. When I initially started this, when I think about the things that I had at the time, I was maybe $1,500 a month is all I needed to break even. And then everything above that was money in the bank kind of thing. It's a little more now when I have marketing, and I've recently brought on a firm to help me with tracking the books, which most of that was driven for tax implication purposes, not necessarily that I couldn't do it or was taking too much time. It's okay, I need somebody to help me understand the moves that need to be made throughout the year when it comes to maximizing the advantages of tax law. And so I brought on somebody else. And so I'm closer to maybe $2,000 a month now, $2,500-ish, depending when you talk about the firm software and the court system access and marketing, that kind of thing, which is still, I would venture to say, probably less overhead than anybody else that has a brick and mortar. So my experience, whether I call it wasting money, I don't want to go that far, but where they're bleeding money because they may not know there's another way is by having that brick and mortar as a solo. Look, if you're a firm that has 10 or 15 attorneys and you're pretty exclusive in the jurisdiction, I don't know that what I do works. Maybe it would with the right people, but you probably need the brick and mortar. But if you're just a solo guy or one or two people and you're really trying to get started, even if you want to get there, but you're like, hey, I don't have the 10 grand it's going to take for 3 or 4 months each month to get me to where I'm starting to make money. Well, and then don't do it. Just start out virtually. Look, we all know that you can create websites that make it appear that you're much bigger than maybe you really are, right? But it also allows me, like I said, the flexibility to do what I do and frees up a lot of my time and resources that, the number one complaint people have about attorneys is they can't get in touch with them or they're not communicating. Clients may not like everything I do, but I've never had a client that complains because I wouldn't communicate with them or they couldn't get in touch with me. Like the systems that I've set up allow me to text with them, take their calls, email with them. And so
Video
it just allows a lot of
conferencing.
flexibility. Yes,
Yeah.
all the things. Got off point here, but were you losing money? Maybe in the brick and mortar in the beginning.
Yep. Okay. All right, good. All right. Now let's talk about client acquisition. At the end of the day, you could be the best trial attorney in the world, but if nobody knows who you are, then, your practice is going to wither and die. You launched your practice right at 2 years ago, which means that in a short period of time, you've had to build online visibility in order to get to where you are today. So talk a little bit about, if you wouldn't mind, what marketing strategies have actually worked for you versus something that was just a complete waste of time.
I think the things that worked the most are probably what I'm still doing now, which is search engine optimization, having the ability to create that content that gets cached in the Google platform and helps show up in the results, and word of mouth. Those two things are still the two things that I get the most clients from now. It's what I was getting the most clients from when I initially started, probably more so from word of mouth. As soon as you create a website, clients don't just come rolling in. But those are the two places I think that I spend time on now, search engine optimization and word of mouth, which is where I get my clients from.
And obviously, since we're working together, I have some insight into what you're doing, but I just like your perspective. Let's talk a little bit about your online presence. So talk a little bit about SEO, what SEO means to you, your content marketing, the content that we're pushing out on your behalf, your social media presence, and what you think is actually generating leads for you as opposed to just noise or brand awareness kinds of things.
Yeah. I mean, for me, when we talk about search engine optimization, for me, it's just if somebody's looking for a criminal attorney or a student conduct attorney in the area that I live in, I just want to be on the first page. How often when you Google something or Bing something, whatever platform you're using, do you go to the next page when you're looking at results? You don't, right? Because
Virtually never.
if it's doing what it's supposed to do within the first 3 or 4, you're finding your answer, right? After you sort through the sponsored, or you learn what those are, and then you sort through and you're where you need to be. And so if you're not on that first page, then I think it's difficult to get clients based on just people searching for you online. I built the website myself and used AI to help generate some articles and content that was allegedly search engine optimized. And maybe it was, and it was working and I was getting a bigger presence, but I needed to ramp it up a bit more, which is why I brought you on to help with, hey, yeah, my website looks okay, but we can really take it to the next level here. We'll write this content as far as your areas of practice pages. You help with blog posts. You're drafting those monthly. I review those. I make changes to those. I sign off on those, even though I may not be the initial author of it. I know what every one of those things say. It's not just simply a stroke of a pen and you're putting it up there. Yeah. And it's tailored, importantly, specifically to what I do. It's not just random blogs about the law. It's about things that I do and that I think are helpful for clients if they're looking for that. And so those things have really helped. I've done some pay-per-click with Google before I got involved with you. I didn't get much out of it. In fact, I don't think I got any client out of it, but I was spending a few $100s a month for 2 or 3 months and I just got nothing out of it. And so I quit doing that. There was another platform I used for a period of a month or so that's pretty well known, but for me, it didn't work. I didn't get any clients out of it. And so I just turned away from those and have really just gone back to, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. If I'm having to pay to get my content out there, then I'm paying to retain clients, which is not a bad thing. But if I'm getting clients driven to my website because of the content that I have on my website, I think not only is that organic searching as we talk about, but it's more in tune with what I'm trying to do. Like I want somebody to come to me because they see the things that I offer and they're like, I want to talk to that guy. I'm not necessarily looking for, hey, I'm coming to you because you paid to have your ad the first one.
Right.
That's great. And if it worked for me, probably I would do it. But I would rather somebody come to me because of the content I had, as opposed to I paid more than the other person for that word. And that's how they got to my website first. So that's what it means to me as far as creating content and websites that are aesthetically pleasing, that look good on the phone, because rarely is anybody going to it off of the computer anymore. And that's quick and has information that's helpful.
Yeah. And again, putting myself in the shoes of one of your potential clients in comparing sponsored results or paid advertising versus the organic, it's going to lead me to your website, which is going to show me or prove to me just what kind of attorney are you. It's going to show me your level of expertise. When I read the content you've written and it applies to me and my particular issue, and I see you thoroughly understand my kind of issue, I'm going to reach out to you, not the person that paid to be at the top just simply because they paid the most.
Yeah. I mean, that's at the heart of it, right? In the long run, it should be cheaper because I'm not having to pay for it.
Yep. All right. So you have an extensive background of teaching. You've taught over 1,200 hours of trial advocacy and leadership for the military. You understand, and you mentioned this earlier, what the military provided you in terms of preparation for starting your own practice. You understand systems and processes and operational excellence. But running a solo civilian practice is obviously different than being a member of the JAG Corps and military operations. So let's talk a little bit about the operational side of your civil practice and focus on the stuff that nobody talks about, but yet can make or break a practice. So talk a little bit about your intake process. Client calls you, who's answering the phone? How's the phone getting answered? Do you have systems set up that potentially helps you screen and or qualify potential clients?
So I'm typically going to retain clients in one of 2 ways. Either they find it on the internet and they click on the contact me form, fill out that information, which is only 2 or 3 questions. They do that, then it feeds directly into the software system that I use for my phone. And I get an email that tells me you have an online lead. And so I can log in, see it, see a brief little write-up as to what they put in there, and I can choose to accept that or not. If I accept it, then I can email them, I can call them, I can text them, whatever it is, and work on acquiring them that way. The other way is if they call me, because either they found my phone number on a koozie somewhere, or they saw the phone number on the website and they called it that way. They call. I'll tell you here the same thing that I tell my clients I have now. If you call and I'm available, I'm going to answer the phone. It rings directly to me. I have a separate number, but they, like many of us probably, have a personal number and a separate number, but they both ring to the same phone. And so I use a specific app that allows that phone number to ring through. And if I answer, then we chat. We can work on trying to retain the client then or answer their questions. If I don't answer, then it's actually pretty awesome, quite frankly. It's an AI-powered answering service. You train it just like you would any other sort of AI language learning model thing. And so I put in, what I do, who I am. I share with it my website. So it goes and crawls that and sees what I do. I tell it, what my hours are. Like, here's what you need to know, right, to answer these questions. And then if you call and I'm not available, that thing answers. It gives an introduction that's trained by me. It gets information, and I've told it that I generally need: name, email address, phone number, what's your issue about, where were you arrested, kind of thing. And it's shockingly very good. We've all called different places that have AI powered things, and it just doesn't understand you. You say representative like 18 different times in different ways, and it still can't get through. This one does like I said, a shockingly very good job. And so if I miss the call or I can't take it, it answers it for me. Then it sends me a message and says, here was the call. Here's what took place. It'll provide me a transcript of that call if I need it. And then I can also text within that same platform. So if a client that I already have, or one that's trying to call and I couldn't get to the phone, I can just text, say, hey, I'm tied up at the moment. I'll get back to you in a moment. So that has been very helpful, because once again, it's when somebody calls, if I'm not free, they leave a message and it comes straight to me, and it allows me to get back to them pretty quickly. Those are really the only two ways that I'm generally getting clients, is through the website or through a phone call. There's the one-offs here or there where somebody may run into me in a courthouse and get me that way. But usually it's through the website, which just seamlessly flows into the software system, or it's through the phone call.
And really, at the end of the day, I think that's all that matters. Or you have Title IX experience and you handle student conduct cases at the university, which requires a unique knowledge, understanding of the higher education environment and compliance and administrative process and procedure. How do you stay current with regards to that? Any regulatory changes, and in general, what sort of continuing education do you take on as a solo practitioner?
So all of these things that are driven at the university are policy-based. Auburn has a code of conduct just like any other university does, and probably high schools at this point. They have a Title IX policy. They'll have different policies in place. And so those are all on their website. You can just go to the website, look at the policy. And importantly, these policies are written for students and non-lawyers to understand them, because most people don't have a lawyer when they're doing some sort of administrative policy-based process. So they're not complicated. So as far as staying current, quite frankly, any attorney worth their salt or their weight in salt can go to the website in 15, 20, 30 minutes, read it, and be like, okay, I understand generally how this is supposed to work. Now, in practice, it can be a little different. But if Auburn or any other college makes a change to their policy, you just review it. What's the change here? Student conduct has a lot more flexibility. There's not necessarily federal regulations, for the most part, that drive student conduct. There's some First Amendment law as far as infringing on a student's right to say things or whatnot. But for the most part, that's going to be heavily influenced by the policy. Title IX policy is each university is going to have a policy in high school, but it's based on the federal regulations. And so you'll have the federal regulations, and then you'll have the university draft their policy based on what the regulations say. And so it creates a lot of uniformity in those policies. There's some nuanced differences depending on the culture of the school and how they want to handle things that they can make some changes to, but it's all driven by that policy. And as far as staying up to date on it, I don't do any specific, or at least haven't done any specific CLE on Title IX, but I do have some alerts set up through Google, and I've got friends in the field that are still heavily involved in it. I'm on a couple of listservs. And so if there are big changes that come through these policies and federal regulations, then I'm going to be aware of it. Because when you change some sort of federal regulation, typically you got to go through the Administrative Procedures Act, where you have to promulgate, here's what we're wanting to do, get public comment, take those comments, incorporate them, all of that. Anytime those things are happening, I'm finding out about it through the listservs and different places like that. But until ultimately they're promulgated, it's going to be the same. Like nothing really changes a ton on it. There is some case law that interprets some of it from time to time. But once again, because it's not stuff that's happening every day, when it comes out, I'll get knowledge of it through listservs, friends telling me about it, that kind of thing. So mostly that's where I'm keeping up with what's going on with those things, through different listservs, people in the field, and just reading the policy itself.
Next question. You hinted at this throughout our conversation, and obviously this is impacted by the makeup of your firm, being a virtual firm. But talk a little bit about your client communication strategy. How do you manage client expectations against keeping them informed and remaining in touch with them without it necessarily consuming any given day where you're interacting with clients?
So this will probably give some people that's been practicing a long time a heart attack. I do not have any of my clients' mailing addresses. I tell them when I retain them, I'm not mailing you anything. People move all the time. If you're talking about students, they're moving generally every year. If you're talking about clients, some of them, they're moving quite often. And you start wasting an immense amount of time mailing things out that get returned or don't get read. And let's be real, many things that we send these clients could be an email, could be a text message. Okay, reminding you about your court date. I could send a letter to somebody reminding them about their court date on November 15th at 9 a.m. in a particular place, or I can shoot them a text, or I can send them an email that says the same thing. It's cheaper for me and it's faster, and the clients prefer it. When I retain clients, I tell them up front, I don't mail you anything. I will text you and I will email you. If your phone number or your email address changes, you need to let me know, just like anybody else would let their attorney know if things change. Because I don't have addresses, I'm not having to mail stuff. So I take all that away. The firm software I use allows me to text them. And so if a client texts me through that number, it goes straight to their file in that software. If I text them, it stays in that file. And so I can go back and look at a chain. And so when I get that text, because I have an app too that does that, I can see it. So clients really appreciate that they can text me and I'll respond to it. And I think importantly, the same thing, like if I'm available and the phone rings, I'll answer it. If I'm sitting on the couch on a Saturday morning and a client sends me a text, and I can respond to that in 10 seconds. Now I don't have to wait until Monday. The client's, wow, my attorney just responded to me on a Saturday morning. Like they think all of a sudden that I'm just an amazing attorney because I communicate with them. So the flaw I have, I would say, is that not only do I have that texting capability through my firm software, I also have the texting capability through the phone number that I have for my firm. There are times that clients will text both of them if they're not tracking. Now, that's my own fault because when I retain a client, I'll tell them, hey, this number you called, you can also text it. It doesn't cause me trouble because it's not like they're texting both, but I will get sometimes a text through one platform or the other, which is probably not ideal, and I need to do a better job of that. But texting is largely the way I communicate with them because look, everybody's texting today. You probably text more with your wife than you email her or that you talk to her on the phone. So I do a lot of texting. And then when I get evidence to share in the form of police reports or things like that, I either emailed it to them, or if it's too large to go through an email, then I will send them a link through the Google Drive and specifically lock it down to one folder that they get to see and then share it with them. And I can't tell you how often clients love to be able to pull up their phone and look at the evidence in their case, because that's just what we do. We're always on our phone. And so I tell them all the time, when I get information, I'll share it with you. I'll send it to your email. I don't have to worry about, I need to get the client to come in and review this, or I've mailed it. I got to put 18 stamps on it because it's so thick or whatever. So part of being virtual and part of not mailing stuff creates, just like everything else, a lot of flexibility and a lot of efficiency. So
that's word, it just popped into my head. A lot of
texting,
efficiency.
Yeah, texting and email. I mean, I was already texting clients this morning. That's what I do to communicate information.
And I think about the interactions we have as consumers with other service entities. Sadly, I've had some dental work done lately. Most of my communication with my dentist in preparation for an appointment has been via text.
Mhm.
And the same holds true for doctor's appointments. They confirm and or send information through text. And worst case, it's through email. So you're absolutely right. So if you could go back to the beginning, go back 2 years ago to day one, launching your firm, what's the one thing that you're doing today that you wish you'd implemented on day one?
Probably the app that I use for my firm business when it comes to the AI power thing I was talking about earlier with the voicemail and the beauty of what that thing does and how it helps me. Initially, I was using Google Voice, which works fine. It's great. Somebody calls you, a voicemail, it comes to your email. You can text through that too. And look, Google Voice may have grown now since with the advent of Gemini. It may offer things like this, but it was still at the heart of it. It was a voicemail that was a recording and somebody leave you a message. This is just so much more powerful because, for instance, I'd gotten a call on Friday from the Department of Mental Health. I have a client that needs to have an evaluation, and all they were looking for was my email address. This AI-powered thing was able to provide them that. And, I was able to look at the transcript and listen to it, and the caller was like, hey, would you repeat that again? And not only did it repeat it, it gave it to it in the phonetic alphabet and said, it spelled it out for them. And so I'm like, all right, well, now all of a sudden, and then a couple hours later, I had an email from them. So I could see that, hey, that worked. And so I didn't have to worry about trying to call them back and none of that. And so that thing has been, as we would call in the military, such a force multiplier because it's like having a staff person taking my calls and helping me with stuff. So if I had to go back, I guess the one thing I would do is probably immediately start with that.
Okay. Yeah. Once we finish this, I'm going to ask you about that. If you're comfortable sharing the name of the product now, that's fine. But if not, you're going to have to give it to me when we finish this.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't own any interest in it or anything, but the app is just called M1. M as in Michael, and then the number 1. And it's just an AI powered answering service. I just came across it through an Instagram ad, like most things in life.
Honey.
And it's been incredible for me.
Okay. Good to know. All right. Lastly, before we get to the rapid fire questions, any conversation about a solo practice should include the ethical or risk management. Obviously, in your line of work, maintaining the highest level of ethics and effectively managing risk is very important because let's be honest, you're it. It's just you. There's not necessarily anyone standing behind you, making sure that things get done on time. There aren't mistakes made. So in focusing on malpractice, ethical compliance, what systems do you have in place in order to effectively manage that, especially when it comes to deadlines and conflicts and any managing client communications?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've probably talked about the client communications piece. When I get an order or something that comes in and sets a court date or has some sort of court appearance, I generally at that moment will do 3 things with it. I will forward it to the client because I have their email. I will text it to them, say, hey, just a reminder, you have this court date. And I will immediately add it to my calendar. And so I do those 3 things so that I've then got a record that I've told the client. And I've told them before, and look, my engagement letters tell clients I communicate through technology, right? Texting and email. If that does not work for you, you need to tell me. And if they ever say, you never told me, I'm like, I've got emails I sent you. I have texts I sent you. And so there's nothing else I can do. And I'll call them. I don't want you to think I don't call clients. If I don't get a response to the text or the email, then I'll call them. So I don't have any concerns that I won't have any ethical complaints about my inability to communicate with clients because of the way I do it. As far as managing potential conflicts, I think much of that is probably a little traditional. The firm software I have, when I put in information with client names and infos, I can run conflict checks pretty easily to see if they pop up somewhere else. And if I get not as much in the criminal side, though sometimes if you've got co-defendants, but if I've got a Title IX person that calls like a respondent, somebody accused of a sexual offense, or what we would call a complainant, somebody accusing someone of a sexual offense, I represent both. I can do both sides of that coin there. But if a complainant calls me and then doesn't retain me, and then the respondent calls at a different time because they found me online, then obviously I don't take their I'll take the call, find out what it is. But then once I do, I will just tell them, look, I can't help you. I have a conflict. And of course, I don't tell them what that conflict is. I just politely decline the representation, try to get on to somebody else. Much of that takes place through notes that I keep in my firm's software, as well as the app. When I get calls, because it's AI powered, it creates notes for me through every call I have. And so it will then send me a summary, AI generated summary of the notes that we just talked about. I'll take those, drop them into the firm's software in that person's name because I'll save it. And then I've always got a way to go back and find it. So those two things are basically what I'm doing to avoid any sort of ethical minefields, is tracking those conflicts and making sure I'm communicating with my clients. And if you do those two things, for the most part, you'll stay out of trouble.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. So let's hit some rapid fire questions. So it's going to be a quick question. Try and give me 30 seconds or less quick answer.
Okay.
So question number one, what's the biggest misconception attorneys have about actually going out on their own, going solo?
I would say it's what we already talked about, that you got to have a secretary and that you got to have a building. You don't have to have either.
If you could invest in only one thing to grow your solo practice, technology, marketing, outsourcing, examples of, what would it be?
Technology, because it bleeds into those other areas. If you're effectively leveraging technology, you can use it to market, what I was doing before I brought you on. And technology can just create white space and free up time for you.
Got it. This next one, I don't know that you'll ever get there considering what you shared with me about your practice, but in your opinion, what's the first sign that a solo needs to hire their first employee, or maybe just a contractor to do some side work, maybe not a full-time employee, but what's the first sign that a solo needs to hire someone for help?
I'm not there yet, so I can't say exactly, but I guess it would become to the point where if your phone doesn't stop ringing and you're trying to figure out time to call back potential clients versus working on the ones you have. And if the administrative begins to tilt more toward taking away from your ability to practice, probably time to bring somebody on to help with that.
Okay, fair enough.
But the more you're leveraging technology, I think, the further you can push that out.
Right.
Unless you're just wanting to build. There are people I know that want to build large firms and be the premier firm in town. That's just not what I want to do.
Okay. And that goes back to, what were your goals when you first started the practice, and how did those goals evolve as you grew? So,
yeah, I know we're a little further in the rapid fire here. Building this and starting this to me wasn't about making money. I just needed to make money to live and take care of my family. But that's never been what was driving me as much as the service being fulfilled and what I'm doing and helping others. And if I can check those boxes, then I'm good with that. The money will come.
Got it. Okay. Talk a little bit about potential clients. What's one red flag that you've seen in the past that sort of highlights the fact that this client might not be the best fit for you?
Probably clients that there's a connection to a family law or a domestic relations issue, and they talked an awful lot about that side of the thing. It may be, hey, maybe I'm not the best fit for them. And it's not because they're a bad person. It's just, there's clearly a lot of emotional aspect involved in this criminal thing that just bleeds over into this family law area that I just, look, God bless the attorneys that do it. It's just not for me. And so a client that talks an awful lot about their domestic side of things may not be the right fit.
Okay, good. Finally, what's one operational detail about managing your practice that many solo practitioners overlook that you think ends up costing them either money or simply their sanity?
That's a hard one for me because there's not a ton that goes into the operational aspect of what I do just because of the way I've set it up. But I would say probably the communication and having to physically mail things to clients. Like, there's a lot of operational logistics that go into that. So I would say for me, I don't do that, which saves me a lot of time and money.
Yep. Okay. Understood. All right. Very good. Artie, thank you. I think this has been incredibly valuable and will be incredibly valuable for small law firms, solo attorneys that are out there trying to either start or develop their practice. You've given us some real talk on what it takes to manage, market, and practice law as a solo attorney, the systems, time management, the financial reality, and the operational challenges that nobody warns you about when you start your own practice. So for attorneys that are considering either going out on their own or that are trying to scale their solo practice, how do they find you?
Yeah, I think all the general ways. You can find me on the internet at VaughnDefense.com. You can email me at Artie, ARTIE, at VaughnDefense.com. You can call or text me. The phone number is on the website as well. And then all the socials are out there. They're all going to be under Defense. Only one A in Vaughn, VAUGHN. But that's how you can get me.
Very good. All right. Thanks, Artie. And thank you for tuning in. If today's episode helped you rethink your approach to building or managing a solo practice, please subscribe to The Legal Edge. We're bringing you real strategies from attorneys who are actually doing it. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thanks.